Hello and welcome back to War Thunder. Today I have the M1 Abrams for you in its tank review, and this is now the fourth of the four high-tier tanks that got introduced in the game that are considered to be the top-end predators for their respective nations. I presented you the Leopard 2K, I presented you the T-64B, and I presented you also the Challenger, and now I think it's the turn for the M1 Abrams. The M1 Abrams has a very, very strong reputation for being, well, the best tank currently in the game, but I think this is not a statement that can be said in every single aspect, so there is hope for its competition. And having played the tank very aggressively, I quickly realized people expect this. They lay ambushes, they get in the shots into you when you come around the corner before you can do it. They just shoot your weak spot with insane precision, and the best results that I got was with a conventional playstyle of, not rushing like a Russian, but, reading the map, pushing as fast as possible into a certain position, and then work your way through the enemy team or to reposition yourself. Do not necessarily rely on your armor, despite it being very, very good. Now, there is another thing that is very good, that is the gun and the gun handling in certain aspects. I will talk about this later on in greater detail, but it's the combination of, things that the tank is going for it. First of all, it never faces the Challenger. In fact, it plays together with it. You face a lot of other teammates that also are hard pushing for kills and are your greatest competition in terms of getting, those desirable 5-kill ace match survivor things that I go for personally, or the double ace and a lot of kills. And so a lot of people drive the M1 Abrams very, very recklessly, over aggressively, and get punished by Leopard 2Ks lying in an ambush, T-64Bs punching straight through their armor, and so forth. So the tank should be discussed. But again, what the tank has going for it, to keep the introduction for it short, is high rate of fire, very good stabilizer, very good mobility and maneuverability, high rate of fire, gun handling overall fantastic, very trollish armor, and also very good survivability, which is kind of a weird thing. And also, 3 sources of smoke. What else? Well, blowout panels for the ammunition, so you very rarely get ammo wrecked in this tank, and the tank has a reputation for it, so a lot of people try to shoot your crew, which is the best protected part of this tank. You see where it's going. This tank fits the meta. It has everything going for it and is not that easy to counter in a 1 versus 1, but you have to apply certain tactics. And I think the tank review should be focused a little bit more around, pointing out the weaknesses of the tank to, counter the spam of this vehicle and so forth. So I think that's a good intro. Let's move on to the armor. The outer hull doesn't really tell you anything. This part here, don't shoot at it, despite there being a hit zone. I will come to this in a moment. Behind this plate, this is not a Challenger plate. There is actually armor behind this, so no 11 out of 10 chance to punch through. This is an auto ricochet zone, and this is probably the biggest weak spot of the tank, that it shares with, to a certain degree, the T-64B, the Challenger, and also to a certain degree the Leopard, although this region here is probably the Leopard 2K's strongest point of armor. Then we also have the gun mantle, and this is another weak spot where we take out the gun breech, and the right and the left side of the turret are very hard, especially the left side is a bit harder than the right side where the gunner and the loader sits. The side of the tank, again, we have here composite armor everywhere behind it, and the hull is pretty weak. So this is the main battle concept, very strong armor with little weak spots from the front, and you still could shred here right through it with some SPAs if you bypass the composite side skirts, which are surprisingly thick with 70 millimeters. But we also have here the usual American design philosophy, where the armor gets thinner, where the ammo block, the engine block is. Another weak spot from the front is here, this part, where you can punch through from the front even with an SPA and hit the engine, set it on fire repeatedly. Also, if you shoot here with a big high explosive shell, you might punch right through the 38mm, splash down and kill the crew, or splash here and splash through. So this is what the T-64B can do with the high explosive shell. I talked about it in its respective tank review. So then the tank from the rear, weak, and also the top, well, it's not that weak, but we also have the 5mm parts here. And if you are good with your aircraft, even with machine guns, you can set the engine on fire. The part where the blowout panels are thin, 12.7 and 25mm, and here where the crew part is, it's thicker with 38mm. So let's have a look at the X-ray, and now we can see the composite armor. This and by the way, in the X-ray, it includes the frontal armor, so the outer armor views. As you can see here, we are including here the 32mm of rolled homogeneous armor. Then we have 600mm of NERA, non-explosive reactive armor, with those plates here. This explains the long belly or nose, I'd say, from the tank. And we also see some fuel tanks. So what this means is that you cannot punch through with the Leopard 2K's heat defense shell with 650mm. Same goes for the ATGM of the T-64B. So don't shoot there. But this portion is probably the most vulnerable and biggest part when it comes to receiving kinetic shots. So with the Leopard 2K's Tier 1 upgrade APFSDS shot, with even the Challenger's stock APDS shot, and especially with the T-64's APFSDS rounds, you punch right through. But if you have the wrong angle, you do not a lot of damage. Very often I punched right through and just killed the driver. If you shoot to the right and to the left, you hit the fuel tanks. They absorb all the shrapnels, very rarely get set on fire. This is a unique thing to those fuel tanks. They are acting like Russian fuel tanks. I'm not joking. And then we also have this 19mm of internal armor, and a lot of shells that punch right through there get absorbed by this armor plating after they lose a lot of further kinetic energy within the fuel tank. And if they hit this angle part here, they have a very little chance to punch through. Just the T-64's upgraded shell can hope to punch right through there and do then further damage to the crew and hopefully blow up this ammo rack, or at least, you know, make it blow out. So then we come to the gun area, and there you can damage it with any conventional round that you fire at it. Just, I think, the heat defense round from the T-62 with 440mm of penetration will not go through there, but everything else, you know, with 500, 600mm of penetration heat round will damage the gun bridge. They will not further go into the tank because a lot of the shrapnels get absorbed by the composite armor that reaches far into the tank, and the crew is still very much protected. So you receive a lot of gun breach damage. Very often people specifically aim for it to then drive to your side and finish you off. And I think the biggest weak spot area is still here, the area around the gun, just under the gun. There is no composite armor. As you can see, it's just 50mm. Even SPA can shoot and penetrate and damage you from the front. So here you can splash it with high explosive shells from the T-64B, you know, the upgrade high explosive shell. It's a joy to blow them up or to finish them up. First to shoot here into the gun breach, force them to repair, reload the high explosive shell and blow them up. I'm not quite sure if it works with the heat FS shell from the Leopard. Yeah, you could try it out in the test drive, because the M1 Abrams is actually a target, especially for the Russians. So then, yeah, there's also some side armor, but as you can see here, there is a little bit of a gap here. There is a little bit cut out from this optics that also absorb a lot of damage. So even if you punch right through this and this with the upgraded Tier 4 shell from the Challenger, an arcade, or the stock, but especially the upgraded shell from the T-64B, you can punch right through. Everything else will not go through, except for the exception of the Raketenjagdpanzer II Hot with the hot missile. They still murder their way through. And it's just the upgraded AP FSDS round from the T64B that has the potential to punch through all this long way and to further hit the plate here, penetrate it still, and ignite the ammunition here. And yeah, this is an ammo rack like in the back of the Tiger II. However, this tank has a unique feature which is a blowout panel. So the ammunition gets hit, it burns off, and as you can see, the warheads are arranged to the outside. So all that really is dangerous are the propellant charges, and they went off through the roof. So you extinguish it with your fire extinguisher, the ammunition that got hit and a bit more is gone, and then you potentially have to refill the ammunition in a cap circle, but you still can carry on the fighting. So the question is if it's worth to take the risk of taking those 11 rounds with you. If you don't want to take the risk, take out 10 rounds. One is registered as already being in the breach, and those ammo racks are gone. But in the beginning, and still when I played it, when this got hit, it still vented out through the back of the turret, which was strange. I'm not sure how it's coded, but doesn't really matter. So then we in the back have also the power pack consisting of the strongest engine in the game, as far as I know, and also the transmission in the back. So yeah, pretty usual tank design, but well, refined to the maximum. So the tank is a very hard nut to crack. You have to specifically aim for certain parts. This gun barrel here, or the gun area around it, or here where the turret ring is, and it shares this weak spot area with, well, the Challenger, the Leopard 2K, and the T64B as well. So just shoot the gun for all of the top tier tanks and then try to finish them off. This is the secret at high tier. It's a bit boring, a bit repetitive, but you know, some sort of balancing factor, I guess. If this is completely modeled true, I don't know. We are really fast approaching areas where stats and armor values and such things are still classified, so I'm not quite sure how much we can trust it. Especially there is a lot of fuss going on about the Challenger having wrong armor model and so forth, but it doesn't really matter because, you know, specific parts are just not armored, like the lower glacis, or they have their limits, like the composite armor arrangement on the M1 Abrams. Nevertheless, it's a hard nut to crack. But you know, shut up. Does this mean that this tank is slow? Well, let's find out. And we can see immediately that the good protection that this tank has from the front and even partially from the side with the increased survivability is not a trade-off in terms of mobility, because we have simply the strongest engine here in comparison with 1519 horsepower from a gas turbine, if I'm not mistaken, for a 54.4 ton tank. And this is giving us nearly 28 horsepower per ton ratio, which is not that much less compared to the KPZ-70 and the KPZ Leopard 2K. However, I have to say that the KPZ-70 is a bigger tank with much less armor. Same goes for the Leopard 2K. And in terms of maneuverability, how fast you traverse and so forth, you even beat the Leopard 2K by quite a bit. And if we then look at all the other tanks that have some sort of protection, like the M60A1 Rise P, to look into the American tech tree, well, you have nearly double the horsepower to ton ratio. Same goes for the T64B and A, and also even the Challenger that you beat by nearly a third. And your top speed is also the highest with 72 kilometers an hour. Now, the reverse speed is not the highest compared to the KPZ Leopard 2K and KPZ-70, but very often you never see that reverse top speed in the both mentioned tanks before, and you are still beating the Russian tanks and also the M60A1 Rise P by a lot. And the only tank that you're somewhat comparable is the Challenger 1, where the reverse gear is one of the big upsides to the tank. So you are a very mobile tank, and if somebody thinks that he can outspeed you, that he can just outrun you or run from you, or just go into position before you might appear there, no, you are very, very fast. Now let's talk about the business end of the M1 Abrams, and immediately we see we have by far the well, smallest caliber, together with the M60A1 Rise P with just a 105mm gun. And this gun, the M68A1, well, it has some things going for it. First of all, with the exception of the M60A1 Rise P, we have the most ammunition with 55 rounds, and unlike with some other tanks, it's not your weak spot to have such big amounts of ammunition in your tank, and just taking out 11 or 10 rounds and you are practically in most cases invulnerable to ammo racks, a very unique feature. Also, your reload beats most other tanks by at least a third, so including the M60A1 Rise P with the faster reload knife, formerly it was 8.3, then also the KPZ Leopard 2K, which was nerfed to 6.7 rounds. You have twice the reload of the KPZ 70 with its autoloader, and you still beat the T64B and 8 by 42% quicker reload, and the Challenger 1 also has 34% longer reload. And then your turret rotation speed is, together with the Leopard 2K, the fastest, approaching SPA levels of turret rotation speed with 40 degrees per second. Again, you leave the Challenger, the T64A and B, and also the M60 Rise P behind you. And this is just the gun handling, which is further shown with the 10 degrees of gun depression and 20 degrees of gun elevation. And the only tank that also beats you in the elevation speed is the KPZ 70 by just 1 degree. 24 degrees per second elevation speed is very, very good. No doubt about this. So you have great armor, you have great mobility, and you have great firepower. What is the trade-off? The ammunition? Well, let's have a look. 2 out of the 5 shells that the tank can fire are stock shells, and I want to begin with the Heat FS, the M456A2 shell, which is basically an M456 shell from the M61 Rise P. Now it flies at 1173 meters per second with a penetration value of 400 millimeters. So at the top end, you do not really impress anybody with it, but you can hull break a lot of the low tier vehicles, splash them, SPA vehicles and so forth. And 400 millimeters, well, it's better than nothing. You still could disable gun breaches and so forth of your opposition. And the other stock shell is the M735 APFSDS round, and this is the same round as the tier 4 upgrade on the M61 Rise P again. 360 millimeters of penetration, 1500 meters per second muzzle velocity, and it's a relatively accurate gun or shell in this perspective, and it does the job against the lower glacis of the Leopard 2K and the T64B. You will one-shot them. So you will not go through the strongest points, you will ricochet off the upper glacis of the Leopard 2K, and you will not go through the composite armor of the T64B, but maybe in some cases of the A. And that then brings us to the tier 1 upgrade, which is the M393 hash shell, which has absolutely no use, because if you want to hull break an enemy, you can use the Heat FS round, which is also a bit cheaper. Maybe if you have the side of a tank and you want to splash it really a lot in terms of a lot of post penetration damage effect, you might use it, but I never used it. I think the tank can very well live without this shell. As a tier 2 upgrade, we get the M416 smoke shell, and this is pretty interesting due to the high rate of fire, due to your huge amount of ammunition reserves. You can additionally take this shell with you with a smoke duration time of 25 seconds. It gives you another option of laying a smoke after your 2 smoke launchers that you can also research, and also your ESS system that is similar to the Russians from your creating smoke for your team through the exhaust pipes of the tank. So it is the 3rd source of smoke for this tank, which is another very strong point, and it got me out of critical situations more than once. Also smoking up enemy positions and laying far or long range smoke support for your allies at top tier for competitive gameplay is an option. As a tier 4 upgrade, we have the M774 APFSDS rounds, and it also travels at 1508 meters per second and has 415 millimeters of penetration. But Holy moly, this shell is inaccurate. I had dispersion values of half a meter in the test shooting at the distance of 300 meters, so to specifically aim for very small weak spots, I would not recommend. The performance is rather similar to the tier 1 AP FSDS upgrade for the Leopard 2K in terms of penetration. We also don't have positive normalization, but the shell does the job, and it's the shell that I used the most on this tank. So it's worth researching, but it doesn't give you any huge advantages compared to the stock shell, which has a similar post-penetration damage effect, and you still have to shoot for the same weak spots. For example, Leopard 2K lower glacis or taking out the gun, and also the T64B, you very rarely get through the upper front glacis, if at all, and you should make it your habit to aim for certain spots on the enemy tank. Take out the gun, take out the tank through the driver's hatch or through the lower glacis. Again, T64B, when the ammunition of the ammunition carousel gets hit, it blows up. Leopard 2K cannot take too much damage, and so forth. So your stock shell is practically for you all you need. And while the stats are not that impressive for comparison to the T64B with its raw power, you don't need it. Because the enemy tanks are weaker than you are in terms of overall armor protection, and they have weak spots which you can use to your advantage with the high rate of fire, with the good stabilizer, and with even having AP FSDS as a stock shell. So I think the tank is, well, it's prepared for engaging the enemies. In a nutshell, it's good enough. You have the tools to make them work. But for those who want to know it precisely, here is a little bit of a stat card. I just aimed for the composite armor, the strongest point of the enemy tank. And T64B, you cannot do anything to the turret front where the composite armor is. You cannot go through the upper glacis. You have to shoot for the lower glacis. You have to shoot for the driver's hatch or for the side if you get it. So this is the meta for the tank. You pay a little bit in terms of raw penetration power, but for your high reload and your good survivability, mobility, and armor protection. But I think it's a trade-off that the tank needs. So here we are on Eastern Europe, and look at the team composition. Just in a moment I'll open up the team statistics for you. Nothing but M1 Abrams, maybe some other tanks for the flavor, people that desperately try to get their hands on the M1 Abrams before the next patch drops, and we potentially see another tank that is even better. There you saw it for a glimpse. In most games that I played it, there were just a handful, 1 or 2 challenges at all. So this tells me what the community itself thinks about the tank, despite my tank review, my opinion, or the opinion of some other hardcore diehard fans. And look at this, we are pushing in great number directly for B. We want to get the kills on the enemy, we want to secure the position. And 1 tank, 2 tank, and I actually shoot through the upper glacis this time of the T64B. He was braking and I was shooting slightly from above, so it's just a few degrees of difference that gives me the chance to penetrate or not to penetrate. And we get shot into the side of the turret. It just kills the commander, and the gun breach and the turret ring are damaged. 30 seconds of repair time, and the other Abrams is already launching its attack on this tank and kills the KPZ-70, and well, on it goes. Another tank comes in and there is a lot of action, smoke going on. Meanwhile, the huge horde of M1 Abrams is murdering their way through the German and Russian forces, leaving them practically no chance, because the M1 Abrams, for all intents and purposes, has the mobility of the Leopard 2K, the armor of the T64B, with a faster firing gun that can defeat both tanks in terms of armor. And on we go after repair. So I was down for like half a minute, even more, in this position. We have a lot of very fast-paced matches. You have a lot of competition in terms of what's going on, because the other M1 Abrams are really rushing for the kills. It's not like who wins, but who gets all the kills. And so it's not surprisingly that I always wondered in my win ratio between well, sometimes between 55 and 70% win ratio, and it has now stabilized itself, I think, at 65% win ratio. That tells you a lot. That is comparable to the British at 6.3 a few weeks ago, or 6.7 nowadays, against the Germans with the fake matchmaker. But you face all the same tanks, and I'm capturing without fear now C, and I'm just smoking up. It will not take me the 25 seconds that the smoke screen lasts. And very often you have 3 sources of smoke. The ESS, H. Then on the G you have 2 launches of the smoke launcher, and you also should take some smoke shells for, team support, for smoking up enemy camping positions while you then move to another position and so forth. So you also have an artillery strike. You are fast, you have mobility, quick rate of fire, good stabilizer, enough firepower to deal with your opposition, and while you might not be the very best in every single pure stat, you are effectively the tank with the best combination of stats. So it's no wonder this tank has such a high popularity and such a good reputation. So at this point in time of the battle, I decide myself, well, it's too early for me to really spawn camp already, or spawn push. There are a lot of planes flying ahead. Well, we get this ZSU-57 good. We also one-shot the SPA. I actually wanted to retreat at this point in time. And can we get the ZSU? Yeah, we can get. So those are already, what, 5 kills? Something like this. And we move on. And so you can see the reverse gear is nothing to be ashamed of. One thing that I have to point out, despite its good acceleration, despite its fantastic top speed, to turn this tank sometimes feels a little bit sluggish. It's not quite as awful as with, for example, the Leopard 2K, but it's still there. So I saw some pinging on the map, but it seems like a Challenger killed the threat and is moving on, my ally. So I turn around again, and now I'm not the tank on the front line anymore. And at this stage I wonder, where is the T-62 that killed the MBT-70 right in front of me? The only chance for him to kill this tank and not get seen by me is if he is on the other side of the river. And oh, look who's there. Make the shot count. Yeah, there we go. Good stuff. Now this is our 5th kill. Sorry about this. So, and we move on. This time on the other side of the river. Let's see what we can further harvest. So the enemy has now enough breath, because I moved out of there, to get C again. Yeah, it's a bit like, it's drastic to say it, but you need to give the enemy the chance to give back, to capture some spawn points or some capture points to go back into the battle, so you have some kills left for the high kill numbers. Yes, it's as drastic as it sounds. And another one shot on the Gepard, and at this stage we don't have any hard targets anymore. It's just farming them. I think I could load the heat shell. I could even load for some enemies the HESH shell to farm them. 6 kills so far. And yeah, I think this is now the point where I could give the tank a final verdict. It has a very good combination of stats. It has a very good combination of mobility, armor, firepower, and it's good enough against the enemy in a head-on engagement, in the long run, on big maps, in city maps, long range, short brawls. The tank is practically suited as good as it can be in comparison to any other tank. So yeah, the tank is awesome, but it's not undefeatable. And to counter it is always a bit tricky. So the idea is to first farm off the ones that rush way ahead of their team, that are greedy and reckless, and to just punish them, and then retreat a little bit more up until the point that you have thinned out their lines to further push them with stronger numbers. Maybe to go into a hull down position to flank them later on, depends on the map, and to use your brain. It's not an I win button against the M1 Abrams, because the M1 Abrams can do that to you as well. But you have to thin out their numbers, which you can do with the turret ring shots. You can just still punch through certain parts of their armor. Most kinetic shots have no problem going through the lower glacis and at least immobilize the tank, to further force it into a long repair, to thin out their numbers, to go for the crew, not the ammo. If it has just 2 crew members left, it still has to go through a longer reload. And then suddenly it doesn't have the reload advantage anymore. And again, a hull down T-64B is not that easy to crack, especially when he aims at you and threatens to take out your gunner. I think I need to make the statement, because from what you have seen from other people where they showed their best gameplay, 10 kills in 1 minute and so forth, it makes you believe that this tank is invulnerable, but it isn't. It's just that this time this tank is the flavor of the month. Maybe it will see a higher battle rating with the new patch, maybe it will get ruffle stomped with the new tanks that come in the next patch and so forth, I don't know. And for those who have this tank, enjoy it while it lasts. And I think this is now the end of the game, and let's have a quick look at the post-battle results. And there we can see 2 capture zones, 8 kills, a lot of hits and critical hits, and we got just 53,000 silver lines, 4,340 research points, and a survivor award together with a lot of other badges. I think the income at top tier is still not the greatest. Despite winning the game with a premium account, the income is pathetic compared to even a normal Tech 3 lower tier aircraft. Nevertheless, this is the M1 Abrams. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about this tank, its advantages and disadvantages. What are your experiences fighting them, fighting with them, driving the tank, and so forth? How has this tank influenced the meta at top tier for the more experienced guys out of there? This is an interesting question, because it ranges from I have no problems dealing with this tank to oh my god, it's completely overpowered. So let me know, what do you think? Anyways, again, that's it for me today, finally, for sure. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Please give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other in the skies and on the battlefields of War Thunder.